Imagine relaxing on a quiet getaway when suddenly the ground begins to move beneath your feet. Not because of an earthquake, but because thousands of giant ants are coming for you. In 1977, Empire of the Ants brought one of humanity's smallest creatures to monstrous proportions, delivering a wild blend of science fiction, horror, and creature feature thrills that has captivated cult movie fans for decades. Packed with suspense, giant insects, and uniquely imaginative charm of 1970s filmmaking, this movie has earned its place in sci-fi history. So let's journey back in time when nature fought back, giant bugs ruled the screen, and audiences discovered that sometimes the smallest creatures can inspire the biggest nightmares. This is the legacy of Empire of the Ants. Greetings, my friends. Mike here with Sci-Fi and more, and welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, welcome to our Team Sci-Fi family, where nostalgic positivity reigns supreme. Empire of the Ants, a wild tale where toxic waste transforms ordinary ants into towering man-eating monsters that terrorize a group of unsuspecting people in a remote Florida island. The perfect mix of giant bugs, suspense, campy charm, and the kind of imaginative sci-fi horror that made drive-in movies so memorable. But before we begin, I would like to thank longtime subscriber and contributor to the channel at DaveBooth5608 for this fantastic suggestion. Released in 1977, Empire of the Ants is a science fiction horror film co-written by Bert I.Gordons and based very loosely on the 1905 short story The Empire of the Ants, written by H.G. Wells. Starring Robert Lansing and Joan Collins, the story follows land developers attempting to sell beachfront paradise on undeveloped swampland, which quickly becomes nightmarish when a toxic spill turns harmless ants into gigantic monsters. This film is the third and last film released by American International Pictures' H.G. Wells film cycle, which also include The Food of the Gods in 1976 and The Island of Dr. Moreau in 1977. Nicknamed Mr. Big by famous Monsters of Filmland founder Forrest J. Ackerman, the writer, director, and producer Bert I.Gordons built his reputation on films featuring giant monsters from King Dinosaur to The Food of the Gods via The Amazing Colossal Man, Earth versus the Spider, and Beginning of the End. But in 1977, he made his final giant monster movie, which was Empire of the Ants. This was not his final movie, but his final giant monster movie. His final movie came in 2014 with Secrets of a Psychopath. And if you think about it for a second, 2014, for a guy who started his film career with Serpent Island in 1954, followed by King Dinosaur in 1955, that is an impressively long career in filmmaking. I mean, he was clearly doing something right. Owing as much to the classic creature feature film Them as it does to H.G. Wells, Empire of the Ants is an ecological fable for the increasingly climate-conscious 1970s, presented in a monster movie package that could have only been the work of the unparalleled Bert I.Gordons. The story begins following the illegal dumping of radioactive waste in the ocean. A barrel of toxic sludge washes up on the beach, not too far from land being sold by unscrupulous developer Marilyn Fraser, played by Joan Collins, who is taking a group of potential buyers to inspect a remote island development in the Florida Everglades. And all seems to be going great. Well, until Marilyn and her clients find themselves under attack by giant irradiated ants. What nobody realizes is that the toxic chemical waste that washed up on the beach has contaminated a nearby ant colony, causing the insects to grow to enormous size, Before long, the island becomes a death trap as giant ants emerge from the swamps and begin picking off the visitors one by one, forcing the survivors into a desperate struggle to escape. But just when the movie seems like a straightforward giant bug thriller, it takes a surprising turn. The survivors discover that the ants aren't just bigger, they've become intelligent. Using a strange chemical secreted by their queen, the ants have enslaved the residents of a nearby town, turning them into mind-controlled workers who serve the colony without question. The film's climax sees the remaining survivors fighting their way through the town and ultimately destroying the ant queen and her nest in a fiery showdown. With the colony defeated and the surviving townspeople freed from the ants' control, the nightmare finally comes to an end. It's a wild combination of giant monster action, sci-fi concepts, and 1970s creature feature charm that makes Empire of the Ants far more memorable than its premise might suggest. Principal photography took place on location in the Florida Everglades and St. Lucie and Martin counties in Florida during the fall of 1976. Filming in remote swampland sometimes proved to be problematic and was particularly taxing for the women because their restrooms were approximately a half hour away by speedboat. Actress Pamela Susan Shoop recalls that because it was a half hour each way, when we went to the bathroom, filming had to wait an hour. It was a mess. But, she added, the shoot was fun. So they had that going for them, I guess. Another problem with the location was dealing with the unpredictable wildlife. According to actor Robert Pine, there was one scene where the actors had to fall out of a rowboat and into the river, where there were apparently live alligators. Gordon had previously promised that a cage would be installed to protect the actors, but for some unknown reason, the cage never arrived. Also, even though they were filming in Florida, the autumn weather ended up sending temperatures to freezing levels. At one point, the cold was so bad that it caused actress Pamela Susan Shoop's jaw to dislocate during one of her screaming scenes, and she had to be sent to the hospital to be treated. As with most Bert I. Gordon films, the director himself oversaw most of the special effects. To create the effect of large ants, the director often used the technique of process shots, where close-up images of live ants were combined with images of the actors on the set reacting to menacing insects. So, to show the ants on a macro scale, Gordon chose to use Panamanian bullet ants filmed in forced perspective, similar to what he had done in his previous films like King Dinosaur and Beginning of the End, and placed them alongside actors to make them look significantly larger than they actually were. And for scenes where ants needed to interact with buildings, like, I don't know, let's say a sugar refinery, Gordon placed live ants inside miniature sets lined with still photos all around it. Now, this occasionally resulted in some continuity errors where the ants appeared to be walking vertically into the sky, kind of like the giant grasshopper did in Gordon's Beginning of the End. The shortcomings of this technique were really highlighted in the scene where the ants are climbing outside the sugar refinery, where some of them just suddenly crawl off the building and walk vertically into the sky. When the film called for actors to be attacked by the ants, some of these special effects come off kind of clunky and frequently consisted of superimposed split screens, forcing actors to stand perfectly still while lifeless rubber ant puppets were wiggled in front of the camera. Bert Gordon and his special effects and production team utilized these physically giant rubber ant mock-ups that were fully articulated for close-up scenes and relied on the mock-ups to simulate the attacks. That's when the special effects crew would manually wiggle the ant mock-ups in front of the camera to simulate those attacks. Joan Collins later said that she did not like working with the ant props as they bumped and scratched the actors, including herself. Now, one fun fact here that's actually kind of interesting is that Empire of the Ants arrived during a career resurgence for Joan Collins. I mean, she had been a Hollywood star since the 1950s, and the late 1970s saw her return to prominence through films like The Stud, The Bitch, and Empire of the Ants before becoming internationally famous as Alexis Colby on the TV show Dynasty.
Good for her. That makes me happy because nobody could have ever played Edith Keeler on Star Trek better than Joan Collins. She owned that role.
So, in addition to no alligator cage to protect the actors in the waters of the Everglades and the autumn weather causing jaw dislocation, ants that walked into the sky, and attacking rubber ant props, Empire of the Ants was plagued by other notorious production challenges. The tight budget and remote locations clearly led to hazardous set conditions, but a severely compromised audio track which went missing, kind of, was a huge blow to the production of The Empire of the Ants. As the story goes, for the notable production hurdle of the missing audio track, allegedly following an intense disagreement between the original soundman and director Bert Gordon towards the end of the shoot, the film's soundman threw all the production audio tapes right into the swamp. And because every original recording was lost, the entire movie had to be looped in post-production, leaving the voices notably out of sync with the actors' mouths. But, despite all that, I say it came together pretty well. In fact, Empire of the Ants had an estimated budget of $500,000. And because the movie was produced as a classic B-grade creature feature, funds were tightly constrained. So the production heavily utilized these budget-friendly practical effects and rear projection techniques, which seemed to work out nicely since the film ultimately grossed roughly $2.5 million at the box office. So, yeah, not too shabby.
Walking down the hall with my camera, and a man walked up to me and said, "Pardon me, is that your camera?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You know how to operate it?" I said, "Of course." He said, "How would you like to make a feature movie?" I said, you got to be kidding. Of course I would, but this is 16 millimeter. They make movies in Hollywood of 35. He said, "No problem, the lab will blow it up. We'll shoot in 16 and they'll blow it up." But the first movie I made for practically nothing. Got people who were wannabe actors and actresses and crew people and so on. They all worked for very, very pennies practically. But the pictures were made for absolutely zero, except a few dollars that the different actors and technicians we paid. It was all non-union, and they were wannabes, as I was. I wanted to make movies, and they wanted to be in the movies. And that's how my first two movies evolved. And after that, the promoter who had stopped me in the hall, and we worked, I made the films, he disappeared with the money. So there was nothing. So, as far as financial gain for me, but that's okay. I made two movies, and that was a credit that was going to help me.
Now, as mentioned, Bert I. Gordon very loosely based Empire of the Ants on H.G. Wells' 1905 short story. In fact, Aside from giant intelligent ants and the idea of humans being threatened by them, the two works are quite different in tone, plot, and theme. For example, in the H.G. Wells story, the ants become larger and more intelligent through natural evolution. Wells presents them as a new species that has developed superior intelligence and organization, posing a genuine threat to humanity's future. Whereas in the film, the ants become gigantic because of toxic chemical waste dumped into their environment. And this was a change that was the result of environmental fears and pollution themes common in 1970s science fiction and horror films. Also, the setting is different. The story takes place in the jungles of Brazil and focuses on explorers and scientists investigating reports of unusual ant activity. In the film, the action is moved to the Florida Everglades and nearby coastal communities where a group of prospective land buyers becomes trapped by the giant insects. Additionally, the scale of the threat is quite different between the two. In the story, the ants represent a potential global threat. Wells suggests humanity may eventually face extinction or dominance by a superior insect civilization. The threat in the film is much more localized. The giant ants menace a small island and a nearby town rather than threatening the entire world. Not to mention that in the story, the ants are highly intelligent and organized right from the beginning. And their growing civilization is the central focus of the story. But in the film, the ants initially behave like giant monsters. The intelligence angle doesn't fully emerge until later, when the survivors discover the ants are controlling an entire town through a chemical substance produced by the queen. Which brings us to the mind control element. In the original H.G. Wells story, there is no mind control element. But in the film, mind control creates one of the movie's most memorable twists by revealing that the ants have enslaved the townspeople, creating a bizarre insect-controlled society where humans unknowingly serve the colony. And since there is no mind control element in the film, naturally the endings are completely different. In the story, the conflict remains unsettling and open-ended. The ants are ultimately defeated, but Wells leaves readers with the disturbing possibility that similar threats could arise again. However, in the film, the survivors destroy the queen and the nest in a climactic big-screen cinematic showdown, freeing the mind-controlled townspeople and providing a more traditional monster movie conclusion. But for me, I think one of the more glaring differences is the tone of the two versions themselves. The H.G. Wells story is serious speculative science fiction. Wells uses the ants to explore evolution, survival, and humanity's place in nature. But the movie is a straight-up creature feature, combining science fiction, horror, suspense, and a healthy dose of 1970s drive-in movie fun. What's really fascinating about Bert I.Gordons' take on H.G. Wells' story is that he didn't simply remake Wells' story. Instead, he took Wells' core concept, ants becoming a dominant threat to humanity, and filtered it through the giant monster movie style that Gordon was famous for. The result is a film that feels much closer to Gordon's earlier creature features like The Amazing Colossal Man and The Food of the Gods than to H.G. Wells' original tale. And what really seems to be a consistent opinion among fans when they compare the book to the movie is that the movie's most Wellsian element isn't the giant ants themselves. It's the idea that humans could become subordinate to a more organized and potentially superior species. The film's mind-controlled town is arguably the closest it comes to capturing the unsettling social commentary found in Wells's original story. So, did Empire of the Ants revolutionize science fiction? I would say yes, although its influence was more modest and niche than that of major science fiction classics. Empire of the Ants wasn't a groundbreaking film in the way that Star Wars or Alien were, but it did make several positive contributions to science fiction and horror culture, specifically by keeping the creature feature alive. By the late 1970s, giant monster movies were becoming less common in theaters. Empire of the Ants helped keep that tradition of Nature Strikes Back science fiction films alive, carrying forward a genre that had been popular since the 1950s, introducing new generations to oversized creatures, mutant animals, and environmental science fiction themes. And even though, as mentioned, it diverges significantly from Wells's original story, the film helped keep interest alive in adapting the works of H.G. Wells for modern audiences. Over the years, the film has developed a loyal fan base among lovers of classic sci-fi, horror, and drive-in cinema. Its combination of giant insects, mind control, and 1970s filmmaking charm has helped preserve interest in a style of science fiction storytelling that might have otherwise faded from popular memory. And let's be honest, not every influential science fiction film changes the industry. Some simply remind audiences why they enjoy the genre. Empire of the Ants embraced an outrageous premise and delivered it with sincerity, helping reinforce the idea that science fiction can be entertaining, imaginative, and fun, even when operating on a modest budget.
That movie is fun. It's like watching a 1970s version of Them, but in colour.
And there you have it, Cosmic Core. We hope you have enjoyed our retrospective on Empire of the Ants. And if you did, please be sure to like and share the video. And if you could, hype the video. That really helps the channel out. And since you're here, stick around and check out some of our other videos if you're feeling nostalgic. And if this kind of thing is right up your alley, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue our sci-fi journey together as a team. Again, I would like to thank longtime subscriber and contributor to the channel at Dave Booth 5608 for this fantastic suggestion. And stay tuned for our next video, The Legacy of John Carpenter's They Live. You know, I remember seeing Empire of the Ants when it first came to television when I was a little kid. And it was about the same time I also discovered 1954's Them. And both those movies just scared me to death when I was a little kid. Good times. Best times. Guys, thank you so much for watching. And thank you all who have bought us a coffee. That is genuinely appreciated. And thank you for your continued support of our channel together. This has been and always shall be our channel together. Have a great galactic day, Cosmic Core, and we will see you in the next one.